Welcome to On the Middle East, Al Monitor's weekly podcast on some of the biggest stories developing in the region. This week, we'll be discussing allegations that Russia is stealing Ukrainian grain and selling it through and to Turkey. The charges were brought by Ukraine's ambassador to Ankara, who has formally asked that the Turkish government stop the illicit traffic. Turkish leaders have denied that any stolen Ukrainian wheat is being marketed in their country, but open source intelligence suggests otherwise. A Russian-flagged ship carrying thousands of tons of grain is being held and investigated by Turkish authorities upon the request of Ukraine, the first such seizure. The charges come against the backdrop of a brewing global food crisis. Ukraine was, prior to the war, a major supplier of grain. Now, some 30 million tons of grain are sitting in Ukrainian silos. Turkey is seeking, in tandem with the United Nations, to secure safe passage of vessels carrying the grain, but there's been no progress on that so far. With us here today to discuss the situation is Yoruk Isik, an Istanbul-based geopolitical analyst who is tracking the movements of ships involved in the illegal commerce. So welcome to our show, Yoruk. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks for inviting me, Amberin.
So there's been a lot of interest recently in this story about how Russia is stealing Ukrainian grain and selling it via Turkey or to Turkey. And there have been multiple investigative pieces on this subject, most recently by the Financial Times. And before that, I saw something on the BBC. There's just been tons of media interest in this story. And of course, the Ukrainians are very upset about it. And in all of these stories, we see you being quoted. You are the big expert, Yoruk. So can you just sort of tell us what's actually happening?
So what we are witnessing is when what we are seeing, actually, if we take a step back, we are seeing two separate wars getting fought back to back. So war number one ended up in a fiasco for Russia. That war was to change the regime in Kiev. And when Russia lost that war, it went back to a scenario we are used to see when things don't work out for Russia. And that is asymmetrical warfare, changing totally unexpected events, use it for Russia's military position or whatever military aims are, whatever diplomatic aims are. We saw that in the Syrian war. We see this in sometime in Africa. So in this case, in the Eastern Europe, in the Belarus-Ukraine case, we saw the energy getting weaponized. We saw last year refugees getting weaponized. So right now, Russia is weaponizing food and grains and in general the food security. And what we are seeing is not new. I've been witnessing, and from my observation position here as an Istanbul resident, by just simply looking at the Bosphorus, that ships carry goods from the occupied territories in Crimea, also from the occupied territories of Georgia. There is a forgotten war and forgotten occupied land there, which one should mention, and that is the Abkhazia. And but the ships carry goods mostly to Turkish ports, because usually the smaller ships that, they don't maybe have insurance, or if something happens to the ship, it's not a big loss, and the Turkey is just by proximity. But in general, to the Eastern Mediterranean ports, and Syria obviously is a very big place for this contraband operation. And to Egypt, occasionally to Greece, we see ships carrying goods. And what has been carried from years, it's grain, because obviously Ukraine is a breadbasket, as the most common cliche goes. And also what is really valuable here is scrap metal, steel junk, scrap metal is getting carried. That is exclusively almost comes to Turkey, because there are operation here to turn the scrap metal into you can reuse it and it becomes very valuable. But what's different right now in last 2 months, the speed and the level of organization Russia is displaying to move these commodities. And like you counted BBC's excellent investigation and FT's investigation, and also there have been several others. One we should mention that France Television, that one that I really, really like because it was the first one that followed how the operation on the ground it's working, which is a very important part. Later on, BBC kind of filled the gap there. That we see an organized approach that we haven't seen before. In the previous years, it was mostly Syrian ships, abandoned ships, etc., that's moving this grain. Now, somebody made an effort because this brand new 3 ships appear, and this we can name them here: Matros Poznic, Matros Koshka, and Mikhail Nanashev. And you see, I'm here. Even there is good messages. Like for example, Matros Poznic. Matros means sailor, so the ship's name is Sailor Poznic, or the Marine Poznic. One can translate. It was the Poznic was the Marine who was deployed in Syria after Turkey shut down the Su-24 plane. So there is
really?
Wow. Yeah, and the Matros Koshka is a pro-Russian character who fought against the allies of British, French, and Turkish allies in the original Crimean War. So there is lots of subtext, classic.
Yeah, a lot of subliminal messaging. But
yeah,
before you continue, there's just one thing I want to clarify here, because we speak about stolen grain. You say this has been going on for years. And so we need to sort of try and understand which grain we're talking about here, because on the one hand, there's the grain from Crimea that was occupied in 2014. So obviously, as you described, it's been happening for some time. But now there's this more organized effort. And does that also include grain that is from the parts of Ukraine that have been recently occupied by Russia?
Yes, there was grain. There are grain depots, obviously. It's been seized by Russia. And so it is right now, what Russia is arguing, and usually since the Soviet times, what Russians like, that they will try to argue little legal points and international agreements, and so now they are trying to confuse us. And like you hear, like from the occupation administration, the so-called the Crimean government, whatever, they say, oh, they are re-exporting the grain coming from Krasnodar, etc. No, I mean, it's just they seize the existing grain that was already in Ukrainian depots waiting to be exported, and they are harvesting new grains literally at gunpoint from farmers. That's why I mentioned the France Television interview, because although BBC found one farmer, in France Television there were more. They literally go and they force people to sell their grain. This is happening. Like it will happen under maybe Vichy government or some administration that people
so
are.
Which parts of Ukraine are we talking about now? Mariupol, or where? Where is this grain?
Like right now, like one of the places I really paid attention recently, like in Oktyabrsk, there was a grain storage site. But in Karach, in Melitopol, there were all grain sites. So when you don't, sometimes there is organizations like Sea Cream, etc., that Ukrainian activists, which they have lots of Russian members also who are opposing this unjust war. And there is eyewitness news coming. But also, like when you use the satellite pictures, which now, by becoming spring, we have significantly more satellites compared to the beginning of the war. At the beginning of the war, when we get some satellite of some new Russian camp, snow covered, when it was in a cloudy day, it was lucky. But now there is more beautiful days following one after another. So we can see many places, and there are key points you can see to use the satellite wisely, because when you look with satellite, you have to choose the points to look intelligently, because you are looking to a giant country, and Ukraine is a giant country. So, but like in Chonhar and Armyansk, where there is key points where the railroad, road networks meet, etc. Those are key places, and we see trucks, massive amount of trucks are carrying from different Crimean points grain to these connection points to be transported to Sevastopol. And some of it goes to mainland Russia also, not the entire thing is for re-export. But for example, in an average day, you see hundreds of trucks in a Chonhar point, and this
That's
operation
kind of really insane. And you, Yoruk, sitting on the Bosphorus in Turkey, like a regular guy, has figured this all out. So is it even conceivable
I should highlight this. Yeah, that is very, I like that you're praising me like this, but open source is not done by one person. This is a source of literally dozens of very good ones, but hundreds of people looked at these satellite images, etc.
But my point is that if you guys collectively, all you, open source intelligence guys, aficionados, sort of fans,
whatever,
yes. Yeah, whatever. And thank you for all that brilliant work. Can figure this out. Is it even remotely conceivable that the Turkish government, with all its, intelligence and its know-how, cannot be aware of this?
I was hoping that you will say this. Because you just literally took the words out of my mouth. Yes, that is exactly my point. There is no way. And besides our advice, etc., there is an excellent Turkish Chamber of Shipping guidance about how to follow this up. It says, check the ship logs, check the AIS background. There are ways that you will look and you will see the ship logs. And given how international these ships are, the sailors, etc., somebody will not put the right date. It will not match that. It will say suddenly the ship one day was in Samsun and next day was in Kerch and the next day was somewhere else. Like the dates won't fit, the timing of it won't fit. There will be amazing gaps. All these ships we name, they have amazing gaps, and the amazing gaps. The ship comes from Mediterranean, it clears Bosphorus. And right outside Bosphorus,
okay,
it disappears from AIS. So exactly like you said, there is no way that this cannot be found out.
Okay, and so, at the start of the war, there was this, narrative that Turkey is Ukraine's big friend. And in fact, I myself went to Ukraine just shortly before, literally days before the war erupted. And it certainly was true that Turkey was held in very high regard, obviously the Bayraktar thing. But even before that, all the sort of exchanges between, the people going back and forth, loads of tourists and history, and Sultan the Magnificent, Suleiman the Magnificent's wife was Ukrainian, Roxolana, etc. But then here we are, with Turkey basically sanctioning this theft. Why is Turkey allowing this to happen? And can we believe the Turkish foreign minister when he claims that they've not established any theft so far?
I can only say that he is not fully informed yet. I don't want to go on the record and say that he doesn't know, but he must not have all the facts. I still repeat my line, and maybe this is an extremely optimistic and very rosy position. I still believe, compared to many other countries on the world, especially in Europe, given most of friends of Ukraine is in the Western world, and Turkey has been a bigger friend to Ukraine than many other very significant European countries. And despite this wheat issue, that is still the case. Turkey stands not just by word, and since 2014, Turkey has been on the record about that is not acceptable. Any territorial violation of Ukraine is not acceptable to Turkey. That is even a bigger position than most of the major European countries. That wasn't the position when we look back right now. That's not the position of Germany or France. They really forced Ukraine to give up big chunks of Ukraine. They were still pushing Ukraine to do this. So I see this situation as an unfortunate outcome. The general environment in Turkey, that uh, the amazing decline in the rule of law and the huge economic crisis, possibly the biggest since Second World War, um, and and the attraction of short-term profit, which is extremely short-sighted, because Turkey is on the record. Ukraine is Turkey's strategic partner. Ukraine is Turkey's neighbor, and through Crimean Tatars, Turkey has blood connection to Ukraine. So taking advantage of this country in this darkest hour, it is totally unacceptable. It is extremely immoral, and it should be unacceptable. Everyone.
Well, that's certainly what the Ukrainians would argue, but we also know that Turkey has this very weird kind of relationship with Russia that's gotten super weird ever since Turkey shot down that plane and then got the Russian S-400s. And I mean, yeah, very hard to really understand what's really going on there. But obviously, an imperative exists for Turkey to sort of try and strike some kind of balance in its relations between Ukraine, the West, and Russia as things currently stand. So is it conceivable that there is some kind of quiproquo between the Russian state and the Turkish state? Or are you saying that this grain business is sort of under the government's radar, it's not sanctioned by the Turkish state? And if you say that it's not, then why isn't Turkey doing more to stop it?
I think they are trying to sustain an impossible position of that. They come up with the line that they are pro-Ukraine but not anti-Russian. I mean, I was since last 1 month on almost in all the interviews are saying that Russia will. You cannot maintain this position. I commend it. It's good because Russia is Turkey's neighbor. It's a huge partner, and Turkey maybe does not have the luxury of taking very harsh decisions against Russia compared to some other Western European countries. We have to live by these people. But Russia, so far, has been taking advantage of Turkey's goodwill. Turkey bent backwards of not to issue sanctions, and it invited for these peace talks. Russians totally shunned that. They didn't participate in goodwill. This, they sent Lavrov here. Like I was keep saying, like, why they're sending Lavrov? I mean, like, who's Lavrov at this point? Lavrov is a person who learned this war started probably from Twitter. Lavrov is nobody in Moscow at this point. Even Lavrov's arrival here for wheat talks is showing to me that they are not engaging in this in seriousness. And when they come, they bring nothing to the table. They are concerned. They want to inspect ships going to Ukraine and etc. That you see, the weeks are passing. They are playing to the time. So yes, there is at this point. I mean, if one other thing to Turkey's credit, let's say, since this war started, they have been trying things like the peace talks, etc. And every time it fails because Russia does not engage. And because I think in principle, Russia will never give this diplomatic victory to Turkey. So, but they've been kind of like punishing step by step. Like they close the Bosphorus, then they try to organize one more thing. They close the airspace. When you look at the planes in the last 1 month, Russian Air Force planes, whatever planes they have left still goes to Syria, it goes through crazy places. It crosses like Saudi airspace. Iraq closed, etc. also the airspace. So it's just like it's gone literally around the world. Just go to Syria. Like their foreign minister couldn't go to Serbia a couple of weeks ago. I mean, it's just so right now maybe they really wanted to push this wheat diplomacy, grain diplomacy, etc., which seems like it's not really working. They really pushed it, and now maybe they will. I'm looking from the rosy side. Maybe they will shut down this grain traffic because there are 2-3 ships. It is a new, and like I'm just probably on the world is only in your podcast. This is getting public right now. There are 2-3 ships get loaded in last 2 days, 3 days, and they are waiting. They're not proceeding towards Bosphorus.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
that is
And
an interesting
there was a
situation.
ship that was just seized by the Turkish government, right?
Exactly. Besides that, that's the Jibek Jolu. It's like the Silk Road in Kazakh. It's owned by a Kazakh company, but it's leased to a Russian company, and also like this lease as a footnote, and to the like at the beginning of the program, I was saying that there is more organization. They created new companies. Probably they will disappear after this operation, so they are not sanctioned. Like this, there is this 3 ships belong to an Astrakhan company. There is this smaller ships now appeared. These are classic moves to avoid sanctions. They know that the world will eventually figure out and ban these companies or ships, etc. So there is a clear intelligence there organizing this, trying to hide their trail, let's say.
Well,
So
you
yes.
mentioned Syria, Yoruk, and of course, we're very interested in Syria. And you said that, which is true, that Turkey has closed the Bosphorus Straits to all naval ships, Russian and NATO naval ships, and it's become very hard, obviously, then to
which
supply.
is another strange thing. I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off, but like, why closing to like, okay, you can ask your NATO partners, don't come in right now, and I don't think NATO doesn't have any desire to directly face Russians, but actually closing to the entire world is another move to really not to offend Russians, which at this point is unnecessary because they are they're not shy about offending anyone. But
But
yes,
are we
I'm sorry.
sure that no weapons or anything are going now via the Bosphorus to Syria, Russian stuff? Couldn't they just conceal them in commercial vessels?
Yes, and actually they do. Russian. That was the piece I wrote for the Middle East Institute like
Yes, I
last month.
remember.
I
It was
think,
a
yeah.
fantastic
So
piece. Yes.
Russian Navy, like many other navies on the world, they uses auxiliary vessels. But the difference from the other navies make public which vessels they are using. Like there's Sea Lift Command, the Merchant Navy in the U.S. and Royal Navy has it. That many French have it. But here, Russia also have declared ships. They belongs to the company Oberon Logistica, which is fully owned by the Russian Defense Ministry. So they have ships that we know they are working for Russian Defense Ministry. They are civilian cruise, civilian flagships, but they should be treated as Navy ships. Actually, at the beginning of the Syrian war, there was similar tactics, and there was confusion. There was more confusion back then because they were not so clear about this civilian cruise, civilian flagships. They are officially working for Defense Ministry. Oberon Logistica since then got restructured. And at one point, I remember Turkish Foreign Ministry said, we're gonna treat civilian vessels carrying Russian armed personnel or armed assets as military ships. At this point, Turkey should make this the similar case. I mean, because they are testing.
So why aren't they?
I think there is this endless desire, like many other European nations have, like France and Germany have also, that they don't want to spoil their relation with Russia. The entire world is gonna punish Russia, but somehow nation X, being in this case Turkey, or like Chancellor Scholz believes it, or from his hours-long phone calls, Macron believes it, they're gonna be the one country that is coordinating things between the rest of the world and Russians, and they're gonna collect benefits from this. But Russia is not really playing this game. This is a wishful thinking on the side of Turkey, Germany, or France that they can manage this relation. Russia, I think, deep down inside, sees all these countries as inferior to it. Russia only sees itself as an equivalent of United States. Yeah. And at the end of the day, only will deal with United States. This is the plain truth.
Is that the way we're going to see this grain crisis resolved? Because after all, it has, cascading effects across the world, and particularly for Africa. How is this going to be fixed?
I think that's what Russians are playing, because the sad truth is, when on beautiful, nice, sunny days, that when things are working out for us, the world, in quote, you can put it in quotes, the Western world, the Northern Hemisphere, whatever the a la mode word is right now, has tendency to forget about the problems of the South. But Russians are very well aware of this, and what they are playing right now is turning the global South against North. When you look at the UN votes, etc., that yes, many countries stand by Ukraine, and that is amazingly good. But when you look at per population, bigger part of the world population is not necessarily by Ukraine. They are standing, usually in a neutral position, trying not to offend Russia, because when the food crisis comes, they don't know who will come to help to them. And when the food crisis comes, that will, from Sahel to Levant, it will overthrow governments. It will overthrow people. There will be massive public unrest. And that's what Russians are playing right now to the time, because that date, if we cannot move this Ukraine wheat, the nearly 30 million tons of wheat from Ukraine, that's what will happen. And so the crisis is coming, and they are playing to the crisis because they didn't get away with what they wanted, which they didn't get away with changing the government in Ukraine, turning everything upside down there. They didn't get away in Belarus fully. And so what they are now, they're gonna spoil everything for everyone. This is a classic Russian scenario, or maybe there's a classic war scenario. When you don't get your way, then they are playing to create a massive chaos around the world. That's what's happening.
Oh gosh, well, I guess that just sounds so terribly depressing. We'll all be needing a stiff drink, I guess, some vodka. Well, Yoruk, that was a fantastic conversation. We learned so much from you. Thank you for all that you do, and hope that we get to have you back on our show sometime soon.
Of course, it will be my pleasure.
I'm Elizabeth Hagedorn, and I'm the State Department correspondent at Al Monitor.
And I'm Joe Snell. I'm Al Monitor's video editor. Let's admit it, this past year has been difficult to stay on top of the news and sift through what's accurate and what's misleading. Let Al Monitor help you.
If you care about the Middle East and North Africa, you should consider listening to Al Monitor's audio series On the Middle East with Andrew Parasalidi and Amber Zaman, and On Israel with Ben Caspi. You can now watch our newest video podcast, Reading the Middle East with Gilles Capel. You can subscribe to these series on your favorite podcast platforms.
And through a host of free daily and weekly newsletters, we offer a range of perspectives with the highest journalistic standards. You can subscribe to these newsletters at almonitor.com.
As an award-winning media service headquartered in Washington, D.C., Al Monitor has a network of over 160 contributors around the world.
So if you haven't done so already, be sure to visit almonitor.com, where you can find all of these newsletters and podcasts, along with first-class reporting and analysis.
And this brings us to the end of this week's On the Middle East. I hope you'll join us next week for another show that hopefully will be just as interesting as this one was. Thank you and goodbye.